the Kettering Foundation, you probably don't know. Many people know the Ford Foundation. The Kettering Foundation is essentially the General Motors Foundation. And Charles Kettering was the founder of the Kettering Foundation. And what he said is that he had about as many patents as anybody, and that he had improved the quality of life for many, many people. All of you use one of his most important inventions, the electric starter on an automobile. So you use that every day. And he made gazillion dollars with General Motors, and left most of his money to the Kettering Foundation. And with it, what he said is, I have made a lot of changes that have improved people's lives. But the most important changes, the most important things, are what local people do in local communities. They deal with the really hard problems that makes people's lives better. And so he left his money for that purpose. And so the Kettering Foundation has been kind enough to sponsor my work for a lot of time. What I do basically in my other life, not standing around here, is that I visit small towns, and well, towns pretty good size as far as Dallas, Texas, and other places. I visit places where people are doing just extraordinary work, and just improving the quality of their life. And then in my other life, I come to places like this and share with you what they're doing. And so that's what we'll be doing this evening, is to sharing with you these true stories of these really good people who live all over the United States and outside of the United States, who do really neat things and really important things. And there are people in this room who do these, and I hope that at the end of the night there'll be more people who will be engaged in doing these kinds of things. Let's move forward. Let's go on past this. We've welcomed. Let's go to the next one. Here's what I did, and I put this PowerPoint together about midnight before I came here, so I'm not going to guarantee the accuracy of all this. What it seemed to me was that I wanted to at least talk to you about these 4 points. Then I'll get past this boring stuff and get into some neat stories. When I reflect back on all the communities I've looked at, it seemed to me that 4 things just stood out. 1, local people must solve local problems. Seems so basic. I will assure you on the front end, there is no Santa Claus in Sacramento. There is no Santa Claus in D.C. If you want a better community, you're going to get it the same way that other people get it, by rolling up your sleeves and going to work. Point number 1. Point number 2. When I'm in communities and I ask them, and I always do, what is your most important asset? The answer I get in 90% of the times, maybe more than that, is our people. Our people are our greatest resources. And I would agree with them, but I would add something to that. Essentially, it is the right people. And by that, we mean those people who are dedicated to this process. I've got a whole list of all what we're calling the right people. But in a really fine book that I've mentioned all day today by Jim Collins called Good to Great, and I'm using Jim Collins' terms here, Jim Collins says that the right people have 2 characteristics. 1, they have the will to persist, and 2, they have the humility and honesty to give other people the credit. And with those 2 characteristics, you get a whole lot done. The will to persist and to see it through, the humility to give the other people credit. The next point that I want to make, I do a lot of leadership training. I meet a lot of neat folks around the United States and elsewhere. And all of them, for the most part, need ongoing training to get better, to get a whole lot better. This morning we met with a group of local leaders from Merced, and one of the things that I said to them is that I find, and I'll show you this again, that these people who get good things done, who get great things done, work on themselves before they go out and try to work on the community. They get better themselves. The one thing you can influence, you may not be able to change Merced, but you can change yourself. These people do that. They get better. We're going to tell the story of these people in just a few moments. The next point that I would make is that structure building is essential. Now, I heard that in the very first class I took in community development. Right over my head. I hadn't the foggiest notions of what the heck they were talking about. But here's basically what they're talking about, and it's taken me a long time to catch on to these things. What do we mean by structure building is essential is that the whole process of improving a community starts with yourself. You work on yourself, then you begin to link into other people. Let me tell you two quick stories which I told earlier today, which make my point. One, there was a couple living in a relatively small town whose child had palsy. They were poor working people. There was no medical care for children with palsy in this place. They would have to drive to Atlanta, 4 hours away, to get their son proper treatment. Well, finally they decided they'd either have to move to Atlanta or do something, but they couldn't keep running back and forth. So they went to the Methodist minister and said, "You know our son Bobby has palsy. Would you make an announcement from the pulpit saying that and he gave them their names, we would like to meet with anybody else whose child has palsy in the basement of the church at 2 o'clock today." The minister said, "It'd be much more powerful if you make this." And he said, "I can't talk in public." And he said, "No, please do." The fellow stood up, began to try to talk, and he hyperventilated. He couldn't talk. I don't know whether you've been in that situation. I have. Scared to death. His wife very generously and graciously reached up and grabbed him by the hand and stood up, and she said, "What my husband is trying to tell you is that our son Bobby has palsy, and anybody who would like to talk about this issue and work toward its solution, would you meet in the church basement at 2 this afternoon?" One other couple came. It's 2 couples. Still can't do anything. They go back to the minister and say, "We'd like to go to some other churches, but we don't know the ministers there. Would you call them and ask if we could come?" Sure. They go to all the churches in town with their same story. A physician, one of the audiences, hears it and says, "What you're doing is important. I'd like to join with you." And other couples begin to come. They finally decide that palsy is just too narrow a disease, so go to any childhood disease. And that's still too small. Then they go to other handicaps. They finally pull it together. I've interviewed the original couple. I've interviewed the director. They created a health program that has now served 200,000 people. It all began with a man so scared he couldn't speak in public, linked up with one other couple, then another couple, then another couple, then a physician, then a team of physicians, and on down the line. That's what we're talking about. It's the way all these things happen. structure building.